All right, here we are on another episode of What's Up, where we discuss whatever's up. What's up?
So today's topic is the need for small churches across
need
America.
for?
Are they needful? Are they irrelevant? Are they a good contribution to the community?
Okay.
Is the cost benefit good or bad?
Okay, so let me understand the question. So, the church, Christians, the body of Christ, exist in the world. That statement just needs to be, all right, that's true. Now, what we call churches are gatherings of believers.
Mm-hmm.
An assembling of ourselves together, to use the King James vernacular, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do not forsake the assembling of yourselves together. So, your question then is an empirical question, it sounds like, maybe. So, does the size of the gathering matter?
Mm-hmm. So as we drive around our area of North Carolina on all these 2-lane highways, even up into the mountains of Virginia where we've been recently.
Sure, everywhere.
4-lane highways, all along the way there are church steeples. There are sometimes brick churches, old wooden churches.
Right.
There are metal buildings that have been turned into churches.
Yep.
And there are all these churches all along the way
Sure.
in rural communities.
Yeah, or if you go into rundown small towns or inner cities, you'll find old laundromats turned into churches and closed down grocery stores, and So all right, so the facilities that are used for the assembling of ourselves together come in every imaginable form there is, from a home gathering, a home church, to mega facilities. What is it? Joel Osteen and them bought what? They bought some stadium there in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be a sports stadium,
Right.
and now it seats 33,000 people in worship service, or 50,000, 30. I think it's 33,000. But anyway, so they bought a stadium. So we have Christians who gather and assemble themselves, the assembling of themselves together. They gather in everything from little tiny gatherings in homes all the way up to stadiums.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I often wonder, as we drive around our area that's so rural,
Yes.
what is the effect of the small church?
Of the small church.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because the large church has enough resource to put out podcasts, and cable TV
Sure.
carries them, and
Yeah.
on and on. And they put out newsletters and emails and social media and all of it.
Mm-hmm.
So they get a lot of coverage. So I often wonder, in these little churches
Right.
that are just tucked into a little curve in the road, what's the effect of that little church?
Okay. What's the effect in what way? What do you mean by that? So when you say effect, are you judging their effectiveness in what realm are you judging their effectiveness? What do you mean by that? Help me frame the question a little better.
Yeah. Are they, so we can't always answer this, are they doing anything?
Right. And what do we mean by
we don't
are
know.
they doing anything?
Yeah.
Obviously they're doing something.
They're doing something.
Yeah. 5 people
Yeah.
gather every Sunday and Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
So they're doing something.
Mm-hmm.
You're asking a question of fruit.
Yeah, I guess
Fullness,
so.
in effect.
Yeah.
And meaning in what? In sharing the gospel and doing good works in their community. I mean, so and I know it's, for the sake of the listener, for our audience, I'm kind of nitpicking your question here because we have to. I'm really answering your question by asking you questions about your question, right? Because we're taught in churchdom, right? There's so many studies. The church, like any other subject there is studied to death. We wish to life, but it seems to be studied to death, right? And so, like we have a friend of ours who had a high position in the Assemblies of God, and he did not like small, ineffective churches. He's a numbers cruncher.
Well, they're small and they're small ineffective.
Well, that's the question you're asking.
Right.
But in his mind, small is ineffective. Right? And I'm sure there's a threshold there. Like there's always got to be a threshold of where you become effective. But just being small means ineffective in some people's minds, right? And that's kind of why you're asking the question. Is just being small make you ineffective, right? And then you say, effective at what? But anyway, so this gentleman he's a bean counter. He's a numbers guy. He's you know what I mean. So he really tracks stuff, and he wants to track results, and so in his mind, small churches and small communities are ineffective and a waste of resources because, and from listening to him speak on this before, because no matter what kind of leader you send them, the people in those areas are ineffective at propagating the gospel. They're homogeneous in their culture, so they don't want other cultures coming into their little gathering, right? So he sees that there's a lot of reasons the church stays small. Demographics matter. Now, if you're in a really, really rural community, there's just not so many people that can come visit your church.
Right.
So demographics matter. But let's just say, if you're a church, if you're in a town of 5,000 people, okay, which is a small town in America. Now we're just for perspective, for those who don't know us, and the upper room, we're in a town of 250 people. So, but we're classified by the Assemblies of God as a village, okay. And in fact, every town in Gates County, North Carolina, would be classified as a village in church growth kind of manuals and models, right? None of them qualify as a town, because I think the largest one we have is 800 people in Sunbury, right? So none of them qualify as a town. They're all villages. So let's just say you're in a town of 5,000 people, and with a greater population within a 30-minute drive of 20,000 people. Okay. That's kind of rural America.
Yeah.
You could be in a town in Kansas or Alabama or Illinois, southern Illinois, right? So a town of 5,000-ish, 5 to 10,000, within 30 minutes of that, triple that size. Okay? That's rural America. We're an anomaly. We're super ultra rural, but that's rural America. All right, so I'm trying to think through how to codify your question here and answer it. So if you're a church in a community of that size, and you've only got 20 people attending your church, there's a reason why.
Yeah. Because
the average church in America is 70 people. Now that's a mean average, and that means it takes the churches of 5 people that claim to be a church, those who are listed on some organizational chart within some kind of denomination, they're listed as a church, but they list their attendance as 5, right? All the way up to Joel Osteen. So from 30,000 to 5 people, the mean average in America is 70. And within the Assemblies of God, particularly in NCAG, right where we are, we're right at that.
How many churches are around 70? That's the average.
Right.
From 0 to thousands.
Yeah, well, it's a mean average. So it's like there's this group in the middle, right?
So what percentage are around 70?
It's something like 60%. So you're going to have
a lot.
Yeah. So you're going to have 20% less and 20% more.
Yeah.
Right. Something like that.
Yeah.
So, but I think with, and I'm not good at averages, but let's just call it 50%. So 50% hit that mean, right? Mm-hmm. And then you got 25 on either side of it. Mm-hmm. Let's call it that. Okay. All right. So if you're in a town of 5,000 in a greater metropolis area, town of 10,000, greater metropolis area of 30,000, 20, 30,000, within 30 minutes of you, 30-minute drive, because people will drive 30 minutes to go to church easy. We know that, right? Yeah. And in a rural area, you have no choice but to do that.
Right. You have to drive that far to do anything. So church is another thing.
It's just it's a given that you'll drive that far to go to church, right? Yeah. And actually longer, but that we'll just go with 30 minutes. We'll do a 30-minute window. Okay, so you and your church is 20, and so you're well below. You're only hitting 15% of the mean average, right? Mm-hmm. Something's wrong, and you're probably ineffective in that community. Mm. So that's what you're thinking about. What churches are like in that realm of ineffective, and then but does being small mean that you're ineffective, right? Mm-hmm. And so you have to define small, and so of course in churchianity, you've got 100 or less is a small church, right? 100 to 200, there's a name for it, and then at 200 you become a mid-sized church, mm-hmm. right? And we know, and I think you cited a study when we were talking about this before, that once you hit 200, because there's all kinds of conferences, there's a couple of pastors we know here in our district that put on these Break 200 conferences, mm-hmm. because that's kind of a number. That's a number that changes mm-hmm. everything, right?
One man that I know studied giving versus results.
Salvations, right.
Salvations. And there's so many different ways of defining that. Yes, exactly. So many variables. Yeah. But he said if you shake it all out, the typical giving for a 200 attendee church, and the typical baptisms or commitments to Christ, whatever
salvations,
however you want to say it, that is the point where
it's the breakover point.
The effort produces a net positive result.
Well, the old saying where the squeeze is worth the juice, right? Mm-hmm. So so there's a lot of other things that go with that. So in Barna's studies, that 200 point also makes it where you no longer have to be a family-driven church. You mm-hmm. become a program-driven church, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. So, and what Barna means in their studies by family-driven is that the whole church is run by a couple of families. Small churches, you got a couple of families that have to do everything. Mm-hmm. Now, if these are really with-it families that are very open and cordial, then that church can be inviting and be healthy and grow. Mm-hmm. But if these couple of families that rule that church and do all the different ministries there, from bookkeeping to worship to children's church to whatever, you see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. If these three families that do all those things are closed-minded people, mm-hmm. then you have a church that's gonna be no bigger than those families, right?
Right.
But either way, even if you've got really good families, it's a family-led church. You got 3 to 5 families that are providing really good ministry. Now, now you got to remember these statistics are looking at a church growth model. So what these statistics mean is that these are seasons of the life of the church you should grow through, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. So the first season is a pastor-led, meaning the pastor's got to get people motivated. Right? Mm-hmm. So he's doing everything. He's cleaning the toilets. He's doing a children's sermon. He's singing the songs like he's pastor-led.
Yeah.
That goes from that to family-led, right? Mm-hmm. And then you should go from family-led to program-led. And hitting 200 allows you to become a program-led church. And what that means is I now have enough money and enough volunteers to have very effective programming. Youth mm-hmm. group, children's group, women's group, mm-hmm. right? So, and this is where it's always we've defied the odds we're in the middle of nowhere in a very small church, but we operate as a program-led church, right? You can say it's because of the giftings of the leader or whatever it is, but we operate as a program-led church. So when we interact with our pastor friends of larger churches, they're always surprised at how we operate or are able to operate, because 90% of the churches around us, I'd say nearly 95, don't operate like that. They operate either as pastor-led. There are only 20 people. They've never gotten motivated. They've never got families organized and motivated. Or they're family-led and they stick right there. Because the families now assume power and they never allow the pastor to get them to keep going and grow past that, right? Again, now I must throw this caveat out that demographics matter. If you're in a town of 250 people, it's just hard to grow. Yeah. Right? Now, we did grow past 200 for a short season. But it was because that growth was, and it was part of, it was a growth pattern. We had followed that model and had gone from pastor-led as a founding pastor to getting people to join themselves to me, finding some effective families in that, becoming a family-led church, and then that spurred growth, and it allowed us to become a program-driven church. And so what drove us over 200 is because we had some really good programming going on. We had boys and girls clubs, Rangers and Impact. We had regular children's church and youth. And our children's church, not only did we were able to have a children's pastor, but then we had children's volunteers, so that our children's church was broken into 3 age groups, right? So we had become very effective and were able to grow. We weren't able to maintain it for a variety of reasons, not least, again, is demographics and some other reasons, but we weren't able to maintain that size. And so what we see for us is, because we try to operate according to this growth model, we were able to fluctuate and then come back and fluctuate and come back. But the community, the demographics don't allow a continued growth support, right? Right. And so the man I was mentioning earlier, who's not a fan of small churches, he knows all those numbers you were just saying, and he thinks they're just an ineffective use of a denomination's money and time. That he'd rather have one church of a 200 or more within an hour drive or so than having 5 churches of 50 or less people, right, that are only 15 or 20 minute drive. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. Just in his model. And so, because he had actually said to me one time when we were in that growth, we were hitting phenomenal growth, and he said, look, he said, number one, it ain't going to last. It can't, because of where you're at. And I knew what he was saying was true, but I was really offended by it at the time. I was really offended. He said, the growth isn't going to last. It can't, because of where you're at. And he said, now, and I'm going to say this. He said, even if you can sustain that number for a while because of your own charisma, he said, the moment you leave, that church will go back down to what that community can support. And he said, Eric, that's about 30 to 50 people. Right? Because he studied the numbers of it. Now, so all that means then is, your question is are those 30 to 50 member churches still effective? And can they be effective? And are they a good to the body of Christ?
Yeah. Is there value?
Right? Do they bring value? Or should they be abandoned for denominations to put their resources into trying to build one big good church in the area, right? Now, that's not realistic, number one, but there's the question that's just being kind of asked, right? Yeah. So,
so I've often just pondered this. If in our rural community, if all of the Christians had the same style, preferences of music and pastoring, preaching style and theological preferences, and if they could all go to church together, that would be a really good, powerful church.
Yes.
But they don't.
And it can't.
And they can't.
Because humans are sinful. That's the answer. I mean,
and we have preferences.
Right.
So is there value in a community like ours to have, we probably have, I would say 20, maybe 20 pretty good churches that meet every Sunday. They have good pastors and some type of ministry to youth and children.
Yeah.
Some type of outreach, a little bit.
Right.
So they're pretty good. I think there's value in pretty good.
For sure. So
I would include our church in that pretty good.
Okay. All right. So
it's our favorite.
We're pretty good. Yeah, we're pretty good. So I would say this. So let me answer your question. Let me really answer it now. In a way that I think is important for a lot of Christians to grasp and pastors to grasp and denominations to grasp. Now, of course, denominations have to look at things financially and other. Mm-hmm. They have considerations. They have business considerations that a lot of people don't like, but it's just the reality. They have business considerations. They have budgets to maintain and money to use wisely.
Yeah.
Right? So, so your question draws into focus something that's dear to my heart. So, because you're literally asking that when I was at a prison called 025 here in North Carolina, when I arrived at that prison camp, I knew, because you know no one, you just show up, you get shipped there, right? This was a camp of 650 men. Good sized camp. And it would have regular religious services conducted by volunteers that came from the outside, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And any inmate could go to any one of these services. So you had Jehovah's Witnesses services, you had Mormon services, you had Islamic services. You had the Baptists would come, the Methodists would come, the Pentecostals would come. So all these volunteers would come in and provide services. Those services would get announced over the loudspeaker. There would be in the programs office, there would be a thing on the bulletin board saying what night each volunteer group had at what time. And then you could, as an inmate, if you were available, if you weren't working, like, because you had worked as an inmate. So mm-hmm. I cut hair. Others worked in the kitchens. Others did maintenance on building. So if you were available and a religious service was announced that you wanted to attend, you could go to it. You could go to all of them. None of them, mm-hmm. are pick and choose, right? But those weren't the church. They can't be, because these were volunteers coming in to speaking to us. And they had no idea, sitting in front of them, how many of these people are Christian, how many are not. They were just speaking to the inmates, all inmates equally, and then they would leave an hour later, right? Mm-hmm. So if there was any church in prison, it was us, inmates, mm-hmm. right? And because of the gift of God was on my life that I did not realize at the time, I was a pastor. And because mm-hmm. I would lead people to Christ and then gather them and then disciple them. Mm-hmm. And they would call me preacher man, but I didn't understand this. This is all hindsight, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. So when I arrived at that camp, there was a Satan worship coven there, of Satan worshipers, led by a former pastor who had fallen away. Mm. And it was him and 6 of his disciples, right? So I decided to target that group and take them out.
What does that mean?
I'm going to take them out.
Take them out in what way?
Well, I started praying. I said, Lord, I want to lead each one of them to Christ. Mm. And if I can't lead them to Christ, if I can't bring them to you, then break them up and send them away. Mm. So this wasn't the day I arrived on that camp. I'd been on the camp for about a month, observing it, figuring out who's who, trying to find some Christians to fellowship. I needed fellowship. But then my natural evangelistic bent, my prophetic bent, had me looking to advance the kingdom. I'm a warrior, and I was going to do battle for the kingdom of God, right? And the obvious people to do battle against were the Satan worshipers who were trying to disrupt Christians all around the camp all they could. So right after I prayed that prayer, that pastor, him and I had confronted each other, he gets shipped off. He get in the middle of the night. They come and get him. That's the way they do you, because they don't want you being able to notify anybody you're going to be being transported. So like 4 o'clock in the morning, they come get him, and he's gone. And we wake up in the morning, he's gone, right? So I start targeting this group. Out of the, I think it was 6 guys were left. I ended up leading 4 to Christ, and 2 just kind of, when it dissolved, they dissolved because they were strap hangers, right? So I was leading on that camp a group of Christians. I was leading a church. I was pastoring a church. I didn't know that. But I was pastoring a church of maybe 15 guys on that prison camp.
So what were you allowed to do to lead them? Could you call everybody together to have Bible study or?
Yeah,
what?
so I could only do a few at a time, or we'd get broken up.
Yeah.
I think I could do 5 at a time, and that's why his group was probably only that size, right?
So what does that mean? Do 5 at a time?
Like I would meet them at a picnic table,
Okay.
and I'd study the Bible with them, right? And then I'd go to another picnic table, and I had this group over there. And you got to remember, these are all in different. They're all in different cell blocks too.
Yeah.
So this is 600 men camp.
So
and they're in different
it
cell
was
blocks.
During a like yard time.
Yeah, like yard time, free time, things like that.
Yeah.
So I was praying with them and for them. I was answering their questions about their loved ones and whatever. I was studying the Word of God with them. I was pastoring them, right? So, and someone did that for me the first prison I was at. God gave me a man to shepherd me.
Very relational, conversational type of leading them.
Well, everything you expect a pastor to do, I was doing.
But just not standing up and preaching.
I could not put them. I was preaching, but I'd have to do it at a picnic table.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Or 3 of us standing at the weight bench, and 5 of us all standing around the weight bench, and I'm preaching to them. I would preach everywhere. Then I got a job with the barber, and they would come in, and that's when I could get the most of them together in the barber shop and preach to them. Right. Yeah, I was preaching sermons. I was doing Bible studies. I was doing it all. We were the church of the Lord Jesus Christ in prison, right? And we were effective. So can a group of 8 to 10 guys for Jesus be effective? Well, 12 changed the world. Right? I think your question is easy to answer in that, yes, obviously groups of Christians can be effective. Small groups of Christians can be very effective.
So what effect does a small group have? In the prison camp there, how many would you say there were who were genuinely trying to follow Jesus?
Well, it's kind of impossible to answer because you can't really connect with so many people because of the way your life is controlled, right?
Was there so I'm trying to lead the answer, but was there a positive effect on the whole group to have some following Jesus?
Well, yeah. So, like when I broke up, in this case, this is, we might have to write another book. So, in this case, that devil worship group was also running numbers and drugs for one of the guards, for one of the sergeants inside. So after I kind of broke that group up, I started targeting them. Wherever they would gather, I would go stand with them.
What's running numbers?
Like being a bookie.
Okay.
Right? Gambling. So I get, after this, I break this group up, right? And the sergeant in charge of the barber shop was a gentleman who was a professed believer, and he knew I was a real deal, and we would talk and everything. And this is so crazy. These stories are so crazy to me, but it shows the effect. So me and the other believers who had broke up this Satan worship group by loving on them, sharing the gospel with them, and confronting them, right? Mm-hmm. We broke up a gambling ring and a drug ring because that's what they were doing, right?
What happened to how did you know it was broken up?
Well, I get called into a sergeant's office, right? And everybody kind of knew this guy because the Satan group was also a white supremacist group. They were all kind of clan type people. You know what I mean? They were Satan worshipers and like the rebel flag crowd, right?
All different demons.
Yeah, all these demons gathered together, right? Anyway, so I get called in this sergeant's office, and this dude was clearly a good old boy, right? And I get called to his office, and there's another officer in there, and when I go in there, the sergeant's sitting at his desk, and the other officer closes the door behind me. No, there's two officers in there. I'm thinking, all right, what's going on? And I said, yeah, what's up? He said, you got a letter here. I said, oh, okay. He said, but I ain't giving it to you. I said, why is that? He said, don't you ever talk to me like that again. And I said, what? And he said, I told you. And then those two officers behind me tackled me and started beating me up and handcuffed me. I'm thinking, what in the world is going on? Right? So they dragged me off to segregation, to the hole. And this sergeant files charges on me for assaulting those two officers and disrespecting him, whatever the charge was, and assaulting these two officers. So I'm sitting in the hole, right? And I'm thinking, this is crazy. And about the third or fourth day in the hole, I've been praying and praying and praying. I thought, dude, I gotta do something here. Well, they have a system called the grievance system where you could file a grievance. So I'm pretty articulate, right? And so I wrote a very good grievance describing the whole incident. 100%. Now that grievance system, it says right on the grievance paper, right, that it gives a description of the chain of custody from the time the inmate fills it out of who it has to go to and how many hours they have to give the initial response to it, which is like 48 hours or 72 hours, right? So I fill this thing out, I mean, detailed, really good, like it's a thesis paper, right? And I give it to the sergeant in charge of segregation, and she's supposed to pass it up the chain. And I'm supposed to have...
Was he on that chain?
No.
Okay.
And I'm supposed to have a lieutenant within 72 hours come to me and investigate that grievance, right? Whatever the time frame was. 48 hours, 72 hours. Anyway, I know, I've read it, and I'm thinking, okay, in a couple of days, someone's got to come ask me about this, right? Well, like 5 days go by.
You were by yourself that whole time?
And so I asked the sergeant in charge of segregation, and I said, can I get another grievance, please? She, like, what for? I said, I'm going to file a grievance because the first grievance was not, I'm going to file a grievance against y'all not following policy on the first grievance.
Yeah.
Because a lot of inmates were frivolous and they used that grievance system to just clog up the system and be jerks, right?
Yeah.
But it is a good system. I mean, it's whoever designed it for the NCDOC, now called DAC, whoever designed it, it was a good system because it did give inmates an opportunity to say, I've been done wrong here. I've been beat up. I've been raped. I've been whatever.
Yeah,
It gave you a way to expose something that's been done to you, right?
They still have human rights, even if they don't have civil rights.
It demanded that it be investigated within a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
So I go to fill out that grievance, right? And she goes, I don't think that'd be necessary. I'll get back to you. And the sergeant in charge of the barbershop comes down, right? He's a very soft-spoken brother. And he said, Earhart, get your stuff together. Come on, you're getting out. I said, oh, okay. And he said, head on back to your cell block. All right. So I'm out of seg now. It's supposed to be in there 30 days, right? Now it's only been like 5 days or whatever it's been, however many days I've been in there, 7 days.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, okay, all right. And I thought, this is fishy. I get back to my cell block, whatever, and the next morning I go to report to work at the barbershop, and he's waiting for me. It was 3 barbers because it was a big prison. So there was 3 of us barbers. We had 3 barber chairs, and I mean we were servicing 650 people, and they all were allowed a haircut of each week. Mm-hmm. So we would each have a line for 8 hours a day. Mm-hmm. All 8 hours just cutting hair, right? Mm-hmm. Anyway, so he's waiting for me. Well, he's always there to open the door for us and stuff. And we had our clippers and all our scissors and all stayed in a locked box. Mm-hmm. So we had to check out each morning and turn back in and each night. Anyway, so after we get all the barbers, he gives the other 2 guys their boxes and gets them started. And he said, "You come with me." And we go to the main library on the prison. There's it's a really nice library, law library, that no inmate was allowed in, which was supposed to be there for us to study for our to be able to fight our cases. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so we go into this thing, and it's a big, beautiful library with these big, like, mahogany tables, like boardroom tables. It was nice. Mm-hmm. So we sit down at this table, and this guy opens up his briefcase, and he pulls out the original grievance. Mm-hmm. And he lays it on the table, and he slides it across. And he said, "I need you to tear this up." I said, "What do you mean tear it up?" He said, "Sergeant so-and-so, the guy that had me beat up," he said, he's really sorry, and he'd really like you to just tear this up.
Just forgive him.
Just forgive him. And I said, and the guy at the time, I said, "Sarge, he did this because the men that were running his numbers and his drugs came to Christ, and they told him they had to stop. Mm-hmm. And you're a believer. Why aren't you standing up for me?" And he said, "Because I can't. And you know that. I'll lose my job." Mm. And he said, "For both of us, just tear it up, please. Mm. Just forgive him." Mm-hmm. I said, "All right, I'll do it on one condition." I said, "Get me a transfer back up to Currituck." There was a little prison in Currituck. Mm-hmm. I said, "Get me home and get me level 3, which was work release." Mm-hmm. And I said, I'll tear it up." And he's like, "Well, I promise you I'll do everything I can to do that." Mm-hmm. And so I tore it up right there, mm-hmm. right? And within 2 weeks, I was shipping out and heading to Currituck, and which got me here, and stories mm-hmm. on and on. But mm-hmm. So that little group of Christians was so effective that it shook up the whole underworld system in that prison. Mm. So if it can do it there, it can do it anywhere, right? Mm-hmm. And a small group of Christians can be effective anywhere. Mm-hmm. Can you be more effective with more money, more volunteers? Of course, mm-hmm. of course. No one's disputing that a healthy church of 200 or more can just reach more people. Mm-hmm. But can a group of 5 dedicated Christians or 12 dedicated followers of Jesus change the world? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so some small groups are healthier than others.
For sure. Some are cultish.
Yeah. And
they call themselves a church or call themselves Christians, right?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of times what's called cult, so like in our area, when we started, we were called a cult. Number one, we're in an area where 92% of all Protestants worship in a Baptist church. Mm-hmm. Only 2% in our region worship in a Pentecostal setting. 2%. So already you're at this deficit, in churchianity world, if you're a Pentecostal church, and we're a Pentecostal church. Then you add on top of that we started out as the only multiracial church in our community. And you could see where people were like, cult.
Yeah,
cult,
that's
right?
no good. That's
snake
not,
handlers.
Yeah.
Like whatever they were calling,
we're not used to
silly
that.
accusations, right?
Yeah.
So, and we grew in numbers and grew in effectiveness and reached a lot of people. And now the probation and parole, turns us when they have needs. Social services turns us when they have needs. Sheriff's Department turns us when they have needs. Other churches turn us when they have needs. So that there's a lot of times that an accusation of being a cult is just silliness of that you're different than everything around you.
Right.
But there are obvious times where you can have a culture that's cultish, and you can be theologically a cult. And when those two align, then you are a cult, right? If your theology and your culture.
So what is a culture that's cultish?
Well, a culture that's cultish, I really believe. So I said this when. And these men are my friends now, but I remember this one pastor here was telling me, a Southern Baptist pastor was telling me, he's in our friend group, and he was telling me how that this one group in the county were calling us a cult. And I said, well, they're the cult. And he kind of chuckled and he said, what do you mean? I said, I just described to him. I said, they don't let people in of other races. They don't let anybody in that doesn't get. You can't. They fired a pastor there for baptizing believers who were not members of the church. I said, so that's Branch Davidian kind of stuff. I said, we don't even have membership. We'll lead anybody to Jesus Christ. I said, so they call.
And getting baptized here
doesn't join the church.
You're not joining this church.
It binds you to Christ.
Yeah.
Where in their mind, baptism is only for church members who are joining our church. Right? That is cultish. That is the definition of cult. Right? But that's Southern Baptist culture, and they don't even see themselves as being cultish, right? And so I laughed and I said, no, the very church that's calling us a cult, they actually operate as a cult.
And if you leave
you're
their
shunned.
church,
if you leave it, you're shunned.
Yeah.
But
so that's one of the biggest things about a cult.
That's one of the biggest things of
that
a cult.
You can't leave.
And how many people have left here, and we still send them birthday cards. We allow them to have their baby showers and wedding showers here. We let them have their funerals here. There's no shunning at all. You're loved on and reached out to regularly for years, right? They operate as a cult, but accused us of being a cult. And the reason is because this was all it was, they don't understand an apostolic form of leadership, right? So they don't believe in a strong central leader, Moses figure, right? Because they believe in a democratic form of church governance, right? Called congregational. It's democracy. And there's a reason America isn't a democracy, right? Because democracy is evil. Democracy is mob rule, right? They don't even see that is so destructive and harmful. So when they see a church that allows one strong central figure to lead together with a board of elders, right, and that the people can't just vote what they want, that scares them. Because what you're doing is offering an alternative form of government to theirs, right?
Right.
And that scares them.
Well, Jesus didn't operate as a democracy.
Of course not.
He was the leader.
Right. Well, and then so he appointed apostles, right? And there's this whole argument about this, but it's clear that apostleship continued on, and then apostles were told to select elders and deacons or servants in every town they went in. So we have a model of how church is supposed to be developed and built, right? But
So small, unhealthy operates like a cult, even if they call themselves a church.
right.
And even if they don't think, or even if other people don't really say, oh, that's a cult, they can operate like a cult.
Yeah, well, but then here's the distinction. So they can be very orthodox in their preaching.
Yeah.
Like, so they hire a pastor that we know and love, and he preaches the Bible. But he's not allowed to change the cultish culture, right? So he can get up every Sunday and preach the Bible, but the culture is still cultish.
So does that church have any good effect? Like, I don't think any person is all the way evil, or any person is no person except Jesus is all the way good.
For sure.
So organizations are made up of people.
Yeah.
What good effect would a group like that bring?
Well, so we'll just take the church that I'm kind of referencing right now, right? They are generational. They're familial and generational. And so that limits growth.
Yeah.
But for those families that are welcomed into the cult or the church, I'm sorry, didn't mean that. So the people who are welcomed in, it gives them a place of fellowship and affirmation, right?
Yeah.
It gives them a place where they can be marry and bury, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it provides a community service in that way.
Carries on traditions. Yeah.
Yeah. They do hire themselves a pastor who will visit them in the hospital and, go visit grandma when she's a shut-in and things of that nature, right? Yeah, so, so the local church really, and I know people decry this, but in many ways the local church is a country club, right? Or an affinity group, or like there's whatever name you want to call it. And people just, they hate that. But that's one of the goods that the local church provides for people. A safe place to be loved and encouraged and prayed for and accepted, right?
Casseroles given when someone's sick.
Yeah, you got someone sick, casseroles are delivered, right? Yeah. Fundraisers for that family that's got a daughter that's got cancer, and they'll sell the chicken plates, and I mean, it's so so the local church does good for its members.
So how much better is it when a healthy church, even if it's small, what's the benefit in addition to all of those things, a healthy church?
Well, I think what makes you small and healthy is that you're not cultish, that you stay kingdom-minded, you stay engaged with the rest of the body of Christ, right? So you're not this exclusive kind of club. Like, you understand that just because you're Methodist, that the Baptists are saved and the assemblies are saved. Like, you know what I mean?
Goodness, crossing that bridge is so hard.
Well, that's what's cultish about it.
But when a person can do that in their minds, each individual can do that, how powerful.
Well, this is the problem, and George Barna shows this. The smaller the church, the less theologically sound its members are, right? Because they usually their theology is now emotional, right? So what was it? I remember that study. So they're less theologically sound when they're small like that, and they're less likely to hold a healthy view of the rest of the body of Christ. They hold an exclusive view, right? So their theology is bad and they're exclusive, right? We joke because we visit a lot of churches, but when we visit small holiness churches, they'll often tell you they're small because they're holy. It's like, no, you're small because you're weird.
Yeah.
Right?
Or they're small because they're mean.
Well, yeah, well, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
They're small because they're mean, or they're small because they're weird, right? Yeah. So if you go into a town of 50,000 people, and you go to some little local holiness church that's 25 people, they are weird and mean and cultish, right?
Mean in a way of judgmental towards others.
Yeah. They don't that other group, man. They don't like them Baptists. They don't like them
or
Methodists. They
when
don't like them,
new people walk in
Pentecostals.
like us, they're kind of looking out of the side of their eye.
Yeah, they get a side eye. Who are you?
What are you
What
doing?
are you doing here?
Yeah.
Are you the devil that's come to disrupt our cult?
Yes.
Right? Yeah. So that's what. So there's a weak theology, and then there's this exclusivity that does not integrate well. So you can be small because obviously the average church, again, back to the averages. The average church in America is 70.
Mm-hmm.
Many are smaller than that because obviously 50% are that size or smaller.
Mm-hmm.
Now 50% or 70.
So that means there are a lot of small churches in largely populated areas.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So and this is where I get a little judgmental because I'm like, dude, because we've been successful in a small community.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always think to myself, Lord, if you would just put us in a town of 100,000, let alone 1 million, wow, could we see growth? Because our model is to reach everyone. Mm-hmm. Black, white, young, old, rich, poor. We believe that we should be a place where they can come find hope and healing in Jesus Christ, right? Mm-hmm. So we're not family oriented in the sense that the few families we have, because we're small, mm-hmm. In the realm of large and small, we're a small church in the Barna study, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. but we operate as a church that's mid-sized or better, right? Mm-hmm. So our culture is what you would find in a church of 500 members. Mm-hmm. Even though the demographics of our area confine us to a size of 100 or so, right? Mm-hmm. There's that's what you're going to, even a good church is what you're going to be able to do. Mm-hmm. We had time to grow more than that, but it was unsustainable in our area, right? So we see times where we grow larger than that, but they're just seasons, and you can hold them for a little while, but you really can't because of the nature of our the rural area we're at. Very transient people here. So you have a very generational locked-in group of people, and then within that there's this huge transient community. Mm-hmm. And we're in an area where it's in a 400 square miles, there's only 10,000 people. I mean, that's crazy small. It's unheard of small. Mm-hmm. It's the middle of Nebraska small. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Yeah, so demographically so I get a little judgmental when I see a pastor of a church, because we do this. Where were we? We were in Florida. I was down there to preach in Jacksonville, but we were staying in St. Augustine. Mm-hmm. So I said, well, let's ride around and go see the Nazarene Church, which you grew up in. Let's see what the Nazarene Church looks like here in St. Augustine. Let's go see the Assembly of God Church. And when we went there to this beautiful town, I think St. Augustine's not huge, 120,000 people, something like that. Good-sized town.
It's pretty busy, pretty going.
It's a
lots of
nice
traffic.
Town, but it's nothing compared to.
It's not Los Angeles,
right? Or Orlando, right?
Yeah.
Orlando's a couple mil, right? So anyway, so it's not Miami, it's not Orlando, but it's 120,000 people.
There's plenty of people.
And we found these two churches.
Yeah.
There were clearly probably 50 people or less.
Yeah.
Tiny little rundown buildings. Mm-hmm. And if
grass,
y'all watching,
the grass
we
was
love
not
you.
cut.
We're not judging you. We don't know you.
Yeah.
But our heart said, why isn't there a Nazarene church here that's 200-300 people really reaching their community?
Yeah, with big signs. Come to our thing.
Right. Why isn't there a similar
event that we're about to have?
200, 300, 400, 500 people in this town that's just killing it, reaching people.
Come to our after-school program.
Now the thing is, we found a couple of non-denominationals that were doing that, mm-hmm. because their culture was like ours. Black, white, young, old, rich, poor. We just want, if you need Jesus, we're here to reach you. And you could tell by the decor, you could tell by the signage, you could tell by everything. There's 2 other churches we visited. We're stuck in an old model that kept them inwardly focused.
Right.
Like, so, and I want to close on this as an example. We live 7 miles from our church, 8 miles. 7-8 miles from our church. So there's 2 churches that are less than a mile from us in our little town where we live. And we're friends with...
We're in the suburbs of the 250.
Yeah, we're in the suburbs of the town of 250. We live out in the suburbs. Yeah. So out in our cornfields where we live, so there's 2 churches about a half mile from us. Each one's about, on either side of us, there's a church a half mile from us, right? And we know many, many, many of the members. And when you meet the people, you realize these are really great people that love the Lord. Very, just wonderful people. So I always ask myself, I was like, well, Lord, how come they're not growing? How come, why when a family like ours walks in, do they look at you sideways? Why is the atmosphere like one that makes new people feel like they can't belong here? I said, because we know the people and they love you.
Yeah.
And they're such kind people, particularly to their own family group, right? Yeah. They're such good people. And the analogy that God gave me was this, and I think this is true for so many small churches, and it's the cultural difference between small churches, and I think it's the difference that will make you whether you're an effective small church or not, to kind of answer that question. And so when I was praying about this, and I was really seriously praying about it because it was important to me, God, why do these churches have the culture they do? When the people inside really seem to love you, why are they so cloistered? Why are they so unfriendly, seemingly, to visitors? And this was what the Lord kind of spoke to my heart. It was, Eric, those people treat that church as their home. And the people as their family. They become so one with each other and love each other, and that's their home.
And oftentimes it actually is blood family.
Absolutely is family.
Yeah.
But the 5 families groups that run that thing are like family.
They are.
Right?
Yeah.
And then the Lord was like, so when a stranger comes to the door of your house, they knock on the door, and you come to the door, and you crack the door open and say, hi, you're friendly to them. You're nice. Hi, how are you doing? How can I help you? What are you doing here? Why are you on my porch? Your attitude one is friendly, but I don't know you, and what are you doing here? Versus if your next door neighbor who you're super friendly with, or your family, a family member shows up, they kind of knock on the door, but they just keep on coming in because they're family, right? Like, my brother would be asleep on our couch. If we were gone, he knew he could just come and he'd be asleep on the couch waiting for us to get home.
Yeah.
Because he's family.
Yeah.
Right? So what happens is, these are really good people that love the Lord, that treat the church like it's their home. And so they guard that thing like it's their home. And they treat every stranger not as family, and not even as a guest, because a guest is someone you've invited to your house. And now, if a guest knocks on my door and I look up, I say, hey, come in. I don't even go, I need to go over and open the door.
Because you know they're coming.
I know they're coming. If I invited them, I can just look them at the door and see them and tell them, come on in. Or I text them and say, hey, the back door's open. We're going to be on the back porch. Come on, because you're my guest.
Yeah.
So they don't treat you as family, and they don't treat you as guest. They treat you as a stranger that has shown up on their doorstep. Mm-hmm. They love Jesus, and they love their church, and they may even love you. Mm-hmm. But you just showed up at their house. Mm-hmm. And let's say they let you in their house. Now you showed up at their house. You're a stranger. You knocked on the door. They came to the door. They cracked the door and said, "Hi, how can I help you?" And you say, "Well, I'm broke down the road here, and I was wondering if I could use your phone." Mm-hmm. Well, they say, "Oh, okay. Well, it's raining. Yeah, come on in." And they let you in to stand at their front door, mm-hmm. on the carpet at the front door. Mm-hmm. They don't invite you in to sit in the living room. Come on in and sit down. Mm-hmm. Right? They let you in, but they let you in to stand there while they hand you the phone, and they stand there with you. Mm-hmm. That attitude is probably what 80% of the churches you and I, because we visit lots of churches, 80% of the churches we go to love Jesus, they love their fellow believers at their church, and they treat everyone who comes to their door as a stranger that they're not sure why you're there.
Right.
You're not a guest, and you're not family. Mm-hmm. And the churches that are effective, and it doesn't matter if they're large or small, they have broke through mentally to where they believe they're a larger part of the body of Christ, or they're a small part of a larger body of Christ. Mm-hmm. So they fellowship with the Baptists and the Assemblies and the Methodists and they fellowship because they believe they're part of the body of Christ, and they have a culture that is already ready to receive the guests that they've invited. Mm-hmm. Our culture is, and we work hard with our leadership team to train them to this. Our culture is that Jesus Christ is sending guests. He's invited them, and our job is to be ready to say, "Come on in, we've been expecting you." Mm-hmm. And that's why we are who we are. Mm-hmm. That makes us small and effective versus small and ineffective. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Good.
Well, God bless y'all. We thank you for spending time with us as we examine cults and churches. Maybe next time we should actually look at some cultic theology. We looked at cultic culture.
Okay.
But we didn't really talk about what cultic theology is.
Yeah.
So we can maybe talk about that in the future. Anyway, thanks for joining us for What's Up. We love you guys. Like, subscribe, share, the things that you're supposed to do with the bleep blooper down there. And you know what I'm saying. Just do it. Anyway, God bless you. We love you. And we'll catch you next time on Straight to the Heart with Eric Your Heart. Thanks, babe.